Well, it's that time of the week again. It's time for Programming by Stealth, and this is Tidbit 18, recorded March 14th, 2026. And I'm your host, Allison Sheridan, and of course, I'm joined by your lovely co-host, Bart Bouchatz. Well, Bart, I know we're not supposed to talk about timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly stuff, but it's been a month we've been out here.
It has been a while, and you and I haven't recorded in quite some time, I think, because we had Helma doing a 3-part piece of wonderfulness. What else have we had? I've lost track of what we last recorded together on Programming by Stealth.
Yeah. For the audience, I had a rather catastrophic injury 2 weeks ago when we were supposed to record. I broke my hip. I am recovering at home comfortably, just waiting for the old bones to heal back together now. So it's all good. I will survive, but I plan on milking it for everything it's worth.
Wait for those bones to knit together.
Exactly.
Knit.
My dad used to say that the screws in wood when you're building something are just there to hold it until the glue dries. Same thing here.
That's fair. Yeah. Will they take your metalwork back out, or is that just...
No, this is like one of the pieces is 7 inches long. It's and a 1/2 inch in diameter. So yeah, no, it's staying for the rest of my life. So I'll be fun at metal detectors. It's going to be awesome.
Oh, gee, yeah. Every airport. Oh, yay.
All right, but that's not what people come here for. They want to hear a tidbit. This is going to be really fun. I've cheated and pre-read the notes, so I'm excited about this one.
Well, good. And we're allowed to be more wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey, I think, in these tidbits, because they are a moment in time. This one is very much a moment in time.
Yeah.
So it is absolutely not a coincidence that we spent the second half of 2025 looking at web hosting on GitHub pages using basically Jekyll, static site generators, all those kind of things. Because I had not an ulterior motive, it was a real motive. I needed to learn how to do this, and the second best way to learn how to do something is to teach it. And the best way is to do it. So I spent half a year teaching, and I spent my January doing, because that was the whole point. So when I had my time off work in January, I was going to move the website. And over 3 weeks, I moved my entire podcast website with all of those years of buildup of content to a Jekyll-based static site generator on GitHub pages.
So I would suggest that the absolute best way to learn is to study it, do it, and then teach it. So now you've been teaching it. So having done it, this is definitely a success story. And by the way, this was from WordPress to GitHub pages.
Yeah. So, well, we're about halfway through our series on the sort of the whole GitHub pages thing in the main series. So just to remind everyone of where we are in the story, we started just with an explanation of what is a static site generator? How is it different to a traditional content management system like WordPress, which is what hosts potfeet.com and for many years hosted Let's Talk as well? How is a static site generator different? What are the pros and cons? And there isn't a right answer. There's just a right answer for you at a given time. And the right answer for me 10 years ago was with WordPress, and now I don't feel it is, so I've sodded off. I think it's important every now and then. And that was installment 175. And then we quickly described how we could use GitHub pages to publish the kind of web apps we spent so long building in much of the main series with our JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. Because, well, hey, if you got like your time at a clock, you spent all that time building it, well, the heck wouldn't you put it on the actual real internet instead of just playing with it on your computer? So that was worth an episode. And then we got stuck into the static site generator that is built into GitHub pages. Now, you can use anything you like as a static site generator in GitHub pages, but if you want to sort of do it for free without effort, the one you use is Jekyll. And so we have been looking at how to use Jekyll, and we've been focusing on sort of the skeleton of a website. So how do we create our own custom layouts? How do we style them? How do we integrate Bootstrap 5 so that we can do all of the things we learned previously in our series on our new static site generated web page? We explored how exactly Jekyll goes about turning a folder full of Markdown files with YAML front matter into a fully fledged website in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And we also had a look at how you can use the Liquid templating engine to sort of insert your content and your metadata into your generated pages, and how you can use the SASS CSS preprocessor to compile a custom version of Bootstrap and build that deeply into your Jekyll site. And we actually never mentioned what CSS or what SASS stands for, because we only mentioned it in passing to put a pin in it. It's like, here we have our Bootstrap. We can customize it using SASS. Look, we've made the background pink. And then we put that aside and we haven't picked it up yet. It's still sitting waiting for us in part 2.
Oh, that's actually good to know, because when I was reading the notes, you had SaaS in there, and I remembered SaaS was not software as a service, because the A is lowercase in that. This is all caps. I was like, Bart, you should probably put what the acronym stands for. I have actually forgotten. We didn't actually study it.
No, and SaaS is SaaS.
Sorry.
As a.
Totally wrong. But not SASS.
Well, I can see why. Because you don't pronounce, technically you should pronounce software as a service SaaS. That sounds weird. So
or Finnish. They pronounce both S's. Long.
Oh.
SaaS. Just like you said it.
So SaaS actually stands for, and this is a backronym if ever I saw a backronym, Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets.
Okay.
So we use that to deeply integrate Bootstrap into Jekyll, and we will be using it to make Bootstrap sites that don't look like Bootstrap sites, which you will notice if you go to lets-talk.ie. It is Bootstrap, but it doesn't look like it.
Right. It doesn't have the classic rounded blue buttons and alerts that are red, and it just doesn't follow the classic style.
Well, it still has the roundiness, but it doesn't have the classic colors, and I've tweaked the fonts. The biggest thing is the fonts and the colors are tweaked, which makes it feel very different.
Yeah.
But if you were to look at the raw HTML, you would see all of the classes you recognize. So it is Bootstrap. It's just been customized. And we are definitely going to circle back to SaaS, because we just said, hey, look, it can make it pink. Now, we'll come back to that. So we need to do that. The key point is our focus has been entirely on the how of crafting sort of the scaffolding of a web page. We haven't really looked at the question of content organization. And as someone who's used WordPress for decades, that's fair to say at this stage, I'm not being rude. You think about your categories and what's a page versus what's a blog post versus, right? That's all that's all sort of structuring your information.
Comments,
it's your taxonomy. We haven't looked at that in the Jekyll universe, because actually that's for part 2, mostly. That's going to be the majority of part 2 is, okay, great. We've made a scaffolding. We can make it look the way we want it to look using Liquid, which we've learned about and so forth. And how do we put stuff in it in an organized and sensible way? Which is a very different question. And, to go from my first or out-of-the-box WordPress site to a useful site takes work. And I know over the years you've rejiggered stuff and you've moved categories around and you've had second thoughts about things. And, it takes effort, right? And to get it to the way you want it. And now when you go to the front page, there's a structure to it that is uniquely pod feet.
Correct. That's the display of it. But the structure is still all of these things in a database and pointing, and they have meanings that were always there, right? Correct?
Well, that's the storage, right? That's how you're storing the information. But the information is organized. You have categories, which you've decided that blog post is a category which has a subcategory for security bits.
Sorry. Yeah, I created that.
Yeah. So that structure you still have to create in a Jekyll site. Just because you're storing it as Markdown files in a folder rather than rows in a database, you still have to structure your data, right? You still have it's still information you're presenting in an organized, sensible way. So we've got to do that. And we haven't looked at that at all. Now, I had to do all of that to build this website. And that's been really interesting about this. So If we hadn't have done all the prep I had done by teaching what we've done so far, I could never have done this move in 3 weeks. But equally, I could never have written the show notes for part 2 without having done the work of actually building a taxonomy and putting structure on a full site's worth of real information. Because I have hundreds of episodes. I have a lot of real content. It's not a dummy website like we've been playing with in Programming by Stealth. This is a real one.
Right.
And so that gave me the practice so that now I'm confident that I can structure the episodes sensibly to tell a coherent story for the rest of this series. So that's sort of the big picture.
Okay.
And I thought, given 3 weeks whole website, this is real world as opposed to our demo site. So I thought it would be fun to share the story of, well, how did I get here? How did this site come into being? So that's what this installment is about.
Cool.
So I'll just explain the Lego pieces I used to build my website with. So targeting the standard GitHub Pages version of Jekyll. Now, we mentioned it back in installment 177, which is probably in like July. It's a while ago anyway. That the Jekyll project is on version 4 point something, but GitHub Pages is still based off Jekyll 3 point something. So they're on the latest version 3 because they've taken Jekyll and customized it to become GitHub Pages, and they haven't started over for Jekyll 4. And it's not clear they're ever going to. GitHub may have just decided that we are staying with 3.x because it does what we need. And if you want to do more, you can use GitHub Actions to build any static site generator, including Jekyll 5, Hugo, as we learned about from, is it Eddie Tonkoy taught us about Hugo?
Yeah.
So in the future, I could go to Jekyll 4, but I was like, no, I have a lot of work to do this January. How about I not make that bit of work for myself and I just use the built-in defaults? So that's what I did.
All right.
And because everything on this show and on my podcast is completely listener supported, we don't have sponsors or advertisers or any of that kind of stuff. So, well, the listeners are paying for this. Open source. So it's all setting up on GitHub. So if you want to have a look, see how it really works, because we're just going to give overviews, you can just go to the GitHub repository link there in the show notes and have a look. It's all there, and it will always be all there.
Wait a minute. If it's all there, doesn't it mean that if we see something wrong, we could do an issue or a pull request after we fixed it?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Just like you do with these show notes. Yes, please.
Right.
We learned in one of the installments, I noticed I haven't 100% finished the show notes. In installment number to do, or installment number what will be written in the show notes before we publish, we learned how to run Jekyll locally on our Mac by installing the right version of Ruby, and we did it. We succeeded. I succeeded and you succeeded, but it was a fair bit of faffing about. And it was so much faffing about that the wonderful listener and occasional teacher here, Helma, was like, well, now's the opportunity to teach Bart and Alison the right way to do this, which is how we got the 3 wonderful tidbits about Docker, which we enjoyed over Christmas and into January. And I literally took Helma's example of how you might do a Jekyll site and used it for this website. So when you look at the Docker configuration in the root of the repo, which you all can see, that's Helma's example. It's perfect. I took the bells and whistles version with the coloring and the DOS little thingies and everything. It looks gorgeous. So I can just say, make up, and ding, all comes up, and I can develop locally. And as soon as I hit save, Jekyll automatically refreshes because Helma included the refresh plugin, which is an optional bonus extra you can choose to do. And so I was just developing away, hitting save, waiting a second, and then Safari would completely auto-refresh, and I would see if I had made things better or worse. Tweak, 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 save, refresh, tweak, save, refresh. It was a joy. And sometimes I would move to my other Mac, and I would just say Docker, install Docker, and then go make up, and it was all here. It's great.
That's amazing. You got to live the dream.
Yeah, so thank you, Helma. You knew exactly what you were doing when you proposed those episodes. It worked perfectly. Thank you.
Nice.
I also chose to use Bootstrap 5.3. So we spent a lot of time on Bootstrap in the main series. So long ago, we were using Bootstrap 4. So the last time I did any of this work, it was in Bootstrap 4, and it was to build the PBS website. Because that's the last one I customized with custom colors and custom fonts and everything. Because you'll notice, again, the PBS website is Bootstrap. It also doesn't look like a normal Bootstrap page because it's also been customized. Turns out things have changed when you go up an entire major version and 3 minor versions. So that was interesting. I ran into that a little bit. But something I decided not to do, because deciding what I would do is half the battle. I also decided I was not going to play to my weaknesses. Graphic design and typography is a bit like me and wine. I know what's bad, I know what's good, and I know what I like, and I have no idea how to make my own. So
that's good to recognize in yourself.
It took me a while to get there because I have insisted I can make this tool work. And if you tell me exactly what to do, I can make it for you using Pixelmator Pro or whatever tooling you give me. I just don't know what to make. Give me an empty sheet and I'm doomed. So I decided I'm not doing that. So I engaged the services of an amazing group of creatives who make Mac apps, and they also do amazing little pixel portraits, by the way. If you want to buy a little avatar that looks like my new social media avatar, they do those for anyone. But as well as doing Mac apps, they're also just a design company, so you can pay them to design you things. And so that would be the Icon Factory. And so I worked with them to develop a new suite of logos for both of my podcasts, and I asked them to write me a corporate style guide for Bartificer Creations. And so that's not a style sheet. That's not a piece of computer science. That's a document that gives a description of how stuff for my corporation should be presented, whether that be in an invoice, a letterhead, a website, anywhere. And so it's the fonts, and I gave them some rules. I said it has to be Google Fonts because I need to be able to use this on the web. So whatever you do has to be available on Google Fonts. So they were constrained on Google Fonts, and they gave me all the typography details, font sizes for headings, subheadings.
Is it like a
code
document,
snippets.
just like a text file that says, this color # F3607 or whatever? Should be more digits, but.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a couple of pages, but it's a PDF. It has a bunch of lorem ipsum and little call-outs that says header, this font, this size, this weight, this color. And then we have a whole other version of it so we have a version of it for light backgrounds, version of it for dark backgrounds. I asked them to do me a whole bunch of colors, which could be used anywhere, but they also happen to align with Bootstrap's way of doing colors, because I knew one of the uses for this style sheet would be Bootstrap. So I made sure that my spec said I wanted success colors, I wanted warning colors, I wanted error colors.
Okay, so they know the names next to them. Okay.
Yeah, so I can plug them in, right? So everything WordPress wants me to plug in, I have an answer for in my corporate style sheet. I actually used the same style sheet to build the last presentation I gave to a mug. I did that on a photography topic, so I needed a dark background. So I used the dark version of my style sheet, and I made a PowerPoint presentation following the style sheet, and it worked perfectly.
I like all of that except for being PowerPoint, but okay.
Yeah, it's really annoying because I wish I was still a Keynote user, but 99% of what I do is for work where I have to use Keynote, or not Keynote, PowerPoint. And it's just, I can't.
I think they're both evil, so it's okay. It's not that it's Microsoft.
That's fair.
I don't believe in presentation software at all, so that's a whole nother anarchist thing.
Yeah, different people work very differently, and there's no right. I don't think there's a right answer. There's just what works for you, and your presentations are excellent. So why should you do it the way I do it?
As are yours.
I don't know. Have you ever said it on your mind? Anyway, that's not.
Yeah. I've watched your lecture. You sent me at least one.
Oh, okay. I'm actually, some of the mugs have published them online. You're right. Yeah. And then finally, I also made use of Font Awesome, which is now at version 7. I'm convinced it was like version 5 the last time we met it, or version 4. Either way, it's on version 7 now. So all of the little doodly bits are all font awesome, which is still as lovely as ever.
The doodly bits. That's a technical term,
So-
folks.
Absolutely, along with the dongles and the whatsits. So some things went exactly like I expected, and I'm just going to call those out. But you know something? What's way more interesting to talk about is the things that didn't go exactly as expected. That's what the meat of this episode is. But I will just recognize where things went to plan. Bootstrap 5 did indeed provide the scaffolding I needed to structure the site's pages, and I really did use just their standard features and components. So the Bootstrap grid layout with breakpoints, which means that I have a completely responsive site. It works from the smallest phone screen to the largest desktop display, and it was built to be completely responsive. And Bootstrap makes that easy, like we learned all those years ago. All of the various bits and bobs of navigation are done using Bootstrap components, so Bootstrap nav bars, drop downs, Bootstrap buttons, some of them grouped into Bootstrap button groups, and Bootstrap breadcrumbs, which I don't know if we ever talked about in the series, but they're in the documentation.
That doesn't ring a bell, but so you act like it all just magically did that. That's a design thing. That's a look and feel, and when is it going to be a drop down versus a nav bar versus a button? So there's a lot of creativity in that.
Yeah, that's the bit of design I am good at. It's not graphic design, because to decide the font and stuff, I just read it off my style sheet. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You're right. The design of the structure is mine, and I'm good at that. So that's interface design, and I'm quite good at that. I did really well in that course in my degree all those decades ago. Oh, it is decades ago. Jesus, 2.5. 2.5 decades since I graduated, folks. God, I'm
That's
old.
crazy.
Anyway, yeah, I know. Also, Bootstrap 5 leans very heavily into Bootstrap cards because they've just become so flexible. They just threw away loads of their old things and just went, use cards. They can do everything now. And they can. So pretty much anywhere on the site where you see a little piece of content grouped together, it's a card. So on the front page, there's a little card for each podcast where you have a list of the 5 recent episodes. That's a card. If you go to the main page for one of the 2 podcasts, there's a little grid of little mini cards, one for each episode. They're also cards, and they're using something called a grid card layout, which is new in Bootstrap 5. That didn't exist in Bootstrap 4.
Huh.
And, so basically it's the standard Bootstrap pieces. Again, they don't look like the standard Bootstrap pieces because they have been styled according to my style guide, but they are Bootstrap. So the markup, the HTML, is nice, simple Bootstrap HTML with Bootstrap CSS classes.
That really works well. I'm gonna interrupt your story to talk about one thing that you didn't describe. You had a beautiful photograph of yourself taken. I open this website and I just grin automatically. This just embarrassed the crap out of Bart. You take your headphones off for a second. This is for everybody else. when you look at this photo, you can see the humor, the impishness of Bart and the kindness. And it's just, I'm sorry, but it brings a tear to my eye. Every single time I open the site, I am just taken by that photo. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. I made Bart give me a high-res version.
I love it to bits. And that is another reason why you outsource to creative people, because that's the first time I have had a professional portrait taken. And strangely enough, someone who does it for a living knows how to capture the essence. They knew how to pose me, how to get me relaxed, how to get me to smile naturally. They were complete pros. And when I saw the proofs and I got to pick, so there were 5 shots I got to pick, 1 for free and 1 I had to pay for. And I ended up buying an extra one, which is that one. So you'll notice if you go to my website and work, there's a more serious portrait.
That one scares me. You look like a headmaster. I'm afraid I've done something wrong when I look at that one. And
the cybersecurity specialist, I suppose they look like that.
Oh, yeah, it is the appropriate photo. Absolutely. But you're not looking mean. You're just looking like, don't mess with me.
Serious Bart. Yeah. But like I say, they did the serious ones and then they went, okay, great, that's done. You look great. Now let's have some fun. And that's where the other one came from. And we were given all 5 and the university paid for 1. And if we wanted any more, it was our own money. And I was like, geez, I'm happy to pay for that second portrait. And so again, professional to do a creative task, and hey, look, I think it looks great. The first time I've seen a picture of me that I don't hate.
Yeah.
In
You
fact,
are
not just that, I
notorious
like
for
it.
not liking photos of yourself. So anyway, but yeah, it's a good lesson to outsource to people who actually know how to do this for a living. I always like to kid with
Yeah.
people when they do a good job like that and say, hey, you should do this professionally and give up your amateur status when I'm obviously paying them for their service.
I like it. The other thing I was happy is that our discussion of Jekyll layouts and the liquid templating system, almost everything I did was stuff we covered in the actual installments. And there were a few times I went a little bit more advanced, but the thing is, because we'd covered all of the keywords and the way Liquid and Jekyll think of the universe, I could just read the docs and it just made sense. So I
Now,
was very
did you
relieved.
refer to your show notes to do it? Or did you just go to the
Yes.
docs? Oh, to your show notes. Good. I like
Well,
it.
yes and, yeah. So my show
Yeah.
notes first, and whenever I was like, okay, well, I actually want to do a little bit more. I want to take this a little bit more custom. And then I just went to the docs and, yeah, okay, great, yeah. And it was all similar. And in terms of the basics, and in the show notes, I've bolded the word basics. Using SASS variables to customize Bootstrap worked exactly like I thought it was, just like it did 10 years ago when I made the first website for Programming by Stealth. It worked great for the basics. So I had a site with my font from my style sheet and my colors from my style sheet. And then I tried to do the nav bar.
Oh.
And that's when it went off the rails.
Huh.
Because it turns out Bootstrap has changed. So I needed to learn something. But we'll get to that in a bit. I learned some very interesting somethings and I'm going to share them with everyone. I've learned that we need to learn something. And the other thing I was really pleased with is that I knew that if I wrote my own Open Graph metadata, I would end up with really nice social media embeds for my stuff. And that's exactly how it worked out. If you look at, there's a link in the show notes to the Mastodon post announcing Let's Talk Photography 149. And the little embed Mastodon puts in is perfect. And that's because I really nail the Open Graph metadata in my site. That's another thing we have to talk about in the series. Open Graph is very powerful. And a little bit of tweaking in your Open Graph setup makes it perfect for embedding, right?
Cool.
Yeah. And of course, there were the unexpected surprises. So we did a lot of prep work, and I was pretty sure I had dealt with my known unknowns. I'd learned, that's where we learned all this stuff. Now, I just got to put a winky here to myself. I did actually completely forget about one entire thing. We'll get to those later. I just forgot that they existed. That was a little surprise. But we're dealing with computers here. So I thought it was pretty inevitable that I'd bump into some unknown unknowns. I'm going to get very Rumsfeldian here. Sure enough, there were indeed some things I didn't know that I needed to know. So, what did I learn the hard way? I learned that customizing Bootstrap has changed significantly since version 4. I had to learn a whole new thing called CSS variables. So when I customized Bootstrap 4, all the customization was in SASS. That was your only way of customizing Bootstrap 4, was to dive into the SASS, which meant that when we did Bootstrap for the main Programming by Stealth series, we never customized it. Our web apps looked like Bootstrap. They always had the Bootstrap fonts, the Bootstrap blues, the Bootstrap greens. We never customized them.
Right.
And that's because customizing it would have involved learning SASS. And I didn't want to go there because SASS isn't a client-side technology. It happens at build time. Well, you don't build a web app like we've been making. A static site generator has a build phase where the Markdown gets built into HTML. So that's the point where the SASS can get processed. But if you write HTML, how's the SASS supposed to get processed? There's no point in time to do that, and that would have completely changed everything, and then it wouldn't have been client. Anyway, it just didn't fit. So we just never customized Bootstrap. It's just like, no, we're not doing that. Now, we could have customized Bootstrap without doing SASS, because it turns out Bootstrap 5 introduced a whole second layer of customization. So Bootstrap itself is still a folder of SASS files that if you just download the default, they have built those SASS files into CSS files, and that's what you put on your website. Okay. And so if you download the source code, like we did in PBS 180, whatever, and you edit the SASS, and then you compile it down to CSS like Jekyll does, then you get new Bootstrap with your customizations. And that's also still true with Bootstrap 5. But the code they have written produces CSS that contains customization in the output CSS using CSS variables, which is something we've never talked about before.
So if you don't touch them, it looks like all other Bootstrap. But if you do mess with, there's hooks basically you can get to?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's hooks in the CSS, which means you don't need a preprocessor, which means we can do it in something like your time adder clock. Okay. And so if you use Bootstrap 5, you could start to use the pod feet colors and the pod feet fonts in your time adder clock and give it just that little shine that makes it yours.
Right.
And these CSS variables are a CSS3, I think, thing. I looked at them about a decade ago, and they looked interesting, except for the fact that lots of the browsers in use by human beings couldn't support them.
Oh, okay.
And so I was like, well, that's fine, but this is of no use to me because I can't use it. But times have changed. Internet Explorer is deader than dead, i.e. is gone. Yeah. And not only that, the world has kind of arrived in a place where cybersecurity is now something we take seriously enough that you can just say, I am only supporting modern browsers. If your browser isn't getting patches, I'm not supporting it. And the whole internet kind of runs like that now. And no one bats an eyelid.
Yeah, they used to think you were a big whiner if you'd say, I'm not going to do IE 5.1 or whatever.
Yeah, and now it's just everyone's on Firefox 572,006 or whatever the hell it is this week.
I just opened it today. I think that is the correct number.
So, actually, CSS variables have arrived in the they just work phase of their evolution. So we are going to go back into the main series and we're going to learn about them because not only are they really powerful, they're also simple, which means that actually we can all use them on everything we do for our own convenience. So, like if you're writing a style sheet and you're copying and pasting the same hex code for your favorite color 20 times, you could just define a variable and then just use the name of that variable 20 times. And then you could change your mind, change the variable at the top of your style sheet, and your entire website will pick up that new variable value.
So CSS variables don't have anything to do with Bootstrap. It's just that Bootstrap can use these.
Uses them.
Okay, but we can learn them and have an independent new skill. Awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So it's both a skill we can use anywhere, and Bootstrap now just provides all these variables with default values. So you can just set as a variable named like bs-background-primary, and you can change the primary color or the secondary color, the warning color, the error color. So you can just change them all by just defining a few CSS variables in your style sheet. It's amazing. So that's all new in Bootstrap 5. And had I been using 5.0, 5.1 or 5.2, I would never have needed to learn that new skill. I could have done everything I needed to do with SASS just like I did all those years ago and like I was expecting to do. But in Bootstrap 5.3, they added the new feature to make it possible for Bootstrap to automatically switch from dark mode to light mode by the user toggling a toggle, basically, or by following the operating system if you choose to make your website do that. I have not done that because that's a whole other... You then got to do all of your styling twice. But to support this feature that some people really, really want, Bootstrap 5.3 changed how dropdowns work. I couldn't get my dropdowns not to look awful because I was customizing my colors without learning these CSS variables. So I had to learn them.
Okay.
Much to my relief, it took me an hour and I was done.
Oh, wow.
Quite easy.
Oh my gosh. So you're like, oh no, this is going to slow me down. Oh, look, I'm done.
Yeah. I was like, phew. The other thing I learned very much to my surprise is that I had set myself a task for the last week. Oh, just do the little fiddly bits. Yeah, spend an hour doing a new favicon to match your new logos. Turns out that's not as easy as I remember. I remember the days when you made one file, it was a .ico file, it was 16 pixels by 16 pixels, and you gave it a special name, and that was that. Turns out it's not how it works anymore.
Oh, no. We
And-
used to just shove an icon up and into a website, or there were services, and it would spit back all of those different files.
Yeah, but it used to be like 3 or 4 files.
Sure.
But I remember you struggling to make your elapsed time adder app work as a so-called progressive web app so that you could pin it to your iOS home screen and treat it like an app. And I knew that was even more work than I would have to do. I remember you having to make a manifest file because that's part of the PWA spec. And you were using your favorite, I guess it was ChatGPT at the time you were using, and it was helping you build a manifest file.
I don't think I ever finished that, by the way. I never.
I was going to say, I think I remember you spending 2 or 3 weeks and getting ever more cranky, and me being like, oh, I don't know, you're ahead of me on this one. I'm not even taking this class. And I don't think you got there in the end. And so I probably should have been a little bit more worried. But I was like, well, I'm just making a favicon. I'm not doing any of that progressive web app stuff. This is just a website. This isn't an app. So I assumed I would ask my best friend Lumo, hey, what's the current recommendation for resolution and file format? And what's the best practices for the HTML tag? I did not get a simple answer. Because it turns out there's a lot of debate. This is an open topic for discussion.
Oh, Lord.
And the more I searched for it, I was going to say Googled, but that would be a lie. The more I Kagi'd for it, the more different answers I got. Every site I went to had a different answer. And they were conflicting with each other, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And eventually I found some sanity in a website that I have now bookmarked forever called faviconhelper.com. And they tell you why all of these pieces of advice exist, because different situations call for different things. And so I was able to look at their table and my needs and find the subset that I actually wanted. Now, it turns out it's not a file like in the ye olde days, but it's not 16 different files like some sites were suggesting. It's only, what was it? 5 files? 8? 1, 2, I forgot to count
5,
them.
I think.
5, yeah, 5. It's only 5 files. So thank goodness for faviconhelper.com. And so in the end, I ended up with a little reusable snippet. So it's HTML plus liquid code that I was able to make into a Jekyll include that I could just include at the top of all of my layouts so that they all had the favicon. And actually, I didn't exactly do that because the podcast episodes use a different favicon to the main website. I decided to really get creative.
Oh, you're wild. You're wild. You're crazy, Bart.
Crazy, perhaps.
You talking about people arguing and debating, that just cracks me up because you are literally talking about 16 by 16 pixels and people are having debates about how they're done. And it reminds me of a guy I met on
There's the thing, Alison. 180 pixels is the 5th file. They're not 100. They're not 16 by 16 pixels anymore.
When would that be? That's when it says Apple-touch-icon. Is that if you make it a web app to your
if you
home
add it
screen?
to your home screen, they're not 16 pixels. They're now 180 pixels because of Retina.
Well, no, but that'd be 90. So what's 90?
The advice said that if you want them to look good on all the different versions of iOS, it's 180.
Right, but it's what I was saying is it's a for the button on your home screen, it becomes the icon. Is that what you're saying?
That is definitely one of the places it is used. And I also believe that in the tabs and stuff these days, it's bigger than 16 pixels. That's probably the 32 pixel version, if not the 128 pixel version.
Huh.
So you see that there's 16, 32, 128, and 180 are now the versions.
Okay.
And instead of making separate files, I found there's a great free app available in the iOS, in the Mac App Store called Iconology. And you upload one master file and a bunch of little tick boxes to say what versions you'd like it to spit out, and you hit go, and it spits you out all of those 5 files in my case. So that made it a lot easier to make my 5 files and then to make my 5 HTML tags.
So faviconhelper.com gave you the code for it, but didn't create the files? Iconology created
the files? It told me what to make. So it told me what resolutions and what the correct syntax is for each one. So rel equals icon for most of them. Some of them then, so one of them is rel Apple Touch icon, the other is a rel equals icon. So all of that syntaxy stuff. And then I knew what I needed, and then I could tell iconology, make this.
Okay.
So thank goodness.
Got it.
All done.
All right. That's cool. And a free app.
Yeah. And then there's a bit I completely forgot about. Like, I just didn't even think about it. I think it was like, I wanted to publish the site on Wednesday before I went back to work the next Monday to give me time to find the bugs. And on Tuesday evening, I was like, oh my God, redirects. I haven't thought about these.
So to the audience, a redirect is like podfeet.com/Patreon is actually patreon.com/podfeet. And you have a bunch of those too. And those have to be those are typed in with our little fingers to the bone.
Yeah. And I don't remember if you did them and I copied you, or if I did them and you copied me, but we have both done this redirect dance on our websites for as long as I can remember.
I'm going to take credit for going first. I'm pretty sure it was me, because that's one of the first things I lecture people because I hear them go, say patreon.com/blah, blah, blah. It's like, don't give people all these different URLs. Just everything good starts with
podfeet.com.
Yeah. I was going to try to say
it's such a catchphrase.
Let's dash talk. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I have done them too. And I just forgot about them. And you and I both, well, you still do, and I had been doing them in my Nginx config. But when I use the static site generator, one of the features is I'm not running a web server anymore.
Right.
No web server means no Nginx, means no Nginx config.
Uh-oh.
Where do my redirects go? I panicked for about 5 minutes, and then I was like, hang on a second. We used to do redirects a different way before we had web servers. There's HTML tags for redirects. You don't have to do it on the server. You can do it in HTML. If I can do it, HTML, the tag goes in the head section, and it's a meta equiv. Meta http-equiv equals refresh, content equals 0, semicolon, URL equals. And if you put content equals 5, it'll wait 5 seconds and then redirect you. If you put content equals 10, it'll wait 10 seconds. But content 0 just means, and redirect. And so that's been in HTML since before we had web servers to be running, right? So many moons ago.
Let me stop you here. So in the head, you've got what you just described, this redirect thing. That's for any redirect you may have written, but that redirect has to be written someplace else.
Well, no. So that is how you tell an HTML page at one URL to automatically send the browser to another. That is a redirect, right? The user types in one URL, their browser loads that URL, and that URL tells them to go somewhere else.
So you have to create a page. You have to create a dummy page at this dummy URL at ltpod or whatever /
right
Patreon. You have to build a page. And in that, you have to change the head to say redirect over to Patreon.
But yes, so that is an HTML-based redirect. You use the HTML to do the redirecting. You can short-circuit that if you're running your own web server by telling the web server, don't even bother trying to find a file. I'm just going to tell you to tell the browser to go over there. So your Nginx is configured to tell the browser that this URL is actually a redirect. Now go over there. I don't have a web server, so I tell your browser using an HTML file. But it's exactly the same thing. You arrive at one URL, it tells the browser.
So you have to have this 28-line, well, it might be shorter because there's some other stuff in here, but you have to have this web page for every redirect. You have to have a separate web page, correct? I mean, it's simple.
Well, yes and no. So that is a Jekyll layout. So I don't have to put this everywhere. Remember, with Jekyll, you're taking Markdown and turning it into HTML. So we used default.html to make one layout that we used to render 50 pages, right? When you write PBS show notes, they all get an HTML page based on a template I wrote once. But there's not 180-something copies of that code. There's one copy of that code in the layout, and the Markdown files just use that HTML. So what I'm actually coding is Markdown files for each redirect, which only contain front matter, and they only contain two things in the front matter, permalink : /Patreon in this example, destination : where I want to go. And those Markdown files are rendered by Jekyll into HTML using that template.
Okay.
So the
I thought
output
you said
site,
you had to have one of these for everyone. Got you. Okay. Oh, that's nice.
So So what I end up writing is really short and easy, and it works because the end result is this HTML gets created for each of my redirects by Jekyll because it's a static site generator. It generates the site.
Yeah. So let me make sure this is really simple for the people listening now, because I asked so many questions about it. The file that he creates for Patreon says --, new line, permalink : /Patreon, destination : HTTPS patreon.com/LTpod --.
Yeah.
That's the whole file, as long as this template exists. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So I just have a folder with a bunch of those files, one for each redirect, and I'm done.
I'm officially jealous because every time I have to go into Nginx and do that config file, it didn't make any sense when I was on Apache, but at least I knew how to replicate it. I learned it from Donald Burr, and I could go in and copy this line, paste it, and change these two things and make another one. But every time I look at it, it's with a cold sweat, whether it's going to work or not when I do it in Nginx. I do not like it. It's a terrible format.
Well, now in 2026, you can ask your favorite LLM, and they will be able to tell you how to do an Nginx redirect.
Yeah, but I remember Bill Reveal helped me with them, and then you helped me with them, and then I had the two of you guys talk to each other because I was getting kind of some conflicting information, and then finally we settled on something, and it's holding still now. But I don't like doing new redirects; they scare me.
They work though.
They do.
Yes. So that's the how of how I put the site together. So the other thing I'm going to share with you as a sort of a prelude to what we haven't yet covered. So I've now shown you how we've used what we did before, but this is kind of a view into what we still have to learn in part 2. So I had to make a taxonomy because I have a site with actual content that I now need to structure. Like you've structured podfeet.com in WordPress, I had to structure my site in Jekyll. So my expectation based on theory and years of experience as a computer scientist is that if you have a clear vision of your taxonomy, in other words, if you understand how your content should be organized, it should result in everything else being simple and logical because you start with the design and then you let it flow into the implementation. Don't do it the other way around. Don't start to build when you don't know what you're building, right? You go to the architect, you get a plan, and then you lay your foundation. You don't do it the other way around. So I spent some time designing my taxonomy before I touched the line of code, and I have been noodling that probably since June, since I was like, I am definitely doing it this January. I've been noodling my taxonomy. So I had that in the bag when I started in January. I didn't make this up in 3 weeks. I knew what I wanted. And so the architecture I've ended up with is that my content, I'm going to use the generic word bucket because I don't want to use an official keyword. I'm going to introduce those keywords to you in the context of Jekyll when we get there. So now I'm intentionally using a made-up word, a Bartism, buckets of data, right?
Accepted.
So the buckets I chose are special purpose pages, the front page, the support page, the credit page. In your world, WordPress calls them pages. So I'm calling them pages. I have 2 podcasts. So that's a taxonomy with 2 entries, one for Let's Talk Apple, one for Let's Talk Photo. I have podcast episodes. That's another bucket of stuff. And I've actually split that single taxonomy into 2 little... In Jekyll world, this is a piece of actual jargon. We're going to learn Jekyll puts content into collections. So I have 2 collections in Jekyll for that bucket, that conceptual bucket. I have a conceptual bucket of contributors, details for every guest who's ever appeared on an episode. And then I have my bucket of redirects. So that's all. They're all the piece. They're just 5 types of data. So YAML front matter and some simple basically a YAML front matter and a simple standard for content slugs allows me to define relationships between each piece of content. So by carefully choosing my slugs, so you would have done this many years ago when you first installed WordPress, you defined your slugs. So for you, I think you have the date and year dash month dash whatever as your slug,
Right.
followed
And
by episode title simplified.
Right. So what he's talking about is podfeed.com/blog/year month and then NC underscore whatever 2006.
Yeah.
26.
And if you go into your WordPress config, there's a page somewhere where you define that slug with little placeholders.
Right. I remember back in your early days, you had something equal question mark some number.
I didn't use slugs.
Numbers.
I kept it at the post
default.
equals, so the non-slug version. That was also a mistake, but once it was started, I had no choice.
Right.
This is probably, you can't backport these things. So I actually spent some time thinking about my slugs. So I was like, okay, I know my 5 buckets. I'm now going to turn those buckets into slugs. So easiest thing to do, a 3-letter slug for each podcast, LTA and LTP.
Mm-hmm.
The episode slugs are going to be the 3-letter slug for the podcast they belong to and the episode number, LTA 123, LTP 42.
Perfect.
The contributors are going to be the names in lowercase with an underscore. So you're Alison _ Sheridan. Nice and simple. So within each podcast episode, I have some front matter that says host : and the slug for whoever's hosting the episode. Guests : and an array of slugs of all the people who are contributing to that episode. So that's how I can connect the episodes to the contributors using their slugs in the front matter. So if some aspects of this seem a little bit complex, it's because I've designed it so that I could add a 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th podcast should I retire and lose my marbles.
If you become like Joe from the North Woods in a podcasting empire, right?
Right. See, I really do want to do a cooking one, but I do not have more than 24 hours in a day and 7 days in a week. So that is just on the back burner and will stay there for some time, but it may well happen. So I designed the taxonomy to be able to have multiple podcasts. Since I already have 2, I could have more. So just design it to be generic. But the one sort of exception I made is that I didn't make the front page generic because I really wanted it to work really well as a front landing page for my 2 shows I actually have. And I didn't want to spend ages customizing it for 3 shows, the 3rd one, which may never happen, let alone 4 shows, 5 shows, 6 shows. It's like, this is a waste of effort. So the taxonomy is flexible, but the layout for the front page isn't. And I just know that if I do add a 3rd show, it's not going to be difficult. I'm going to have to create one Markdown file in the podcasts bucket. I'm going to have to contain a matching collection in the site config file. And I'm going to have to tweak the front page to make it work for 3 or 4. And that's all I'm going to have to do if I add a 3rd, 4th, 5th show.
Okay.
So, it's a pretty good structure. So I have my architecture, my taxonomy. So now I need to turn that into URLs. And again, you plan this in advance because then it's much easier to implement it in Jekyll. So I decided that each of my buckets should have a scheme for making their URL. So the pages are just going to be / name of page.html. So my support page is support.html, etc. The podcasts are just going to be / and their slug. So if you want to get to Let's Talk Apple, you just go to / LTA.
Nice.
If you want to get to a specific episode, it's the episode slug. / LTA 149 will take you to Let's Talk Apple 149. And
Perfect.
The URL for the contributors is contributor / slug. So you're at contributor / Alison _ Sheridan.
Should that say /contributor in the show notes? Because you say /
I guess it
LTA
should.
49.
For consistency, you're absolutely right.
But we do need the following / because that gets you to the name of the person. Gotcha. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And then the permalink, their definition is, well, I'm not going to tell you what the slug is because it's defined in the front matter. So for the permalinks,
what's a
so
permalink?
For the redirects, So if you scroll back up to the how I do the redirects, the two pieces of metadata are permalink : /Patreon destination : where it goes.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is the URL scheme says use the permalink from the front matter.
Okay.
I could have called that waffles. I could have said
Okay.
use the waffles from the front matter.
Okay, got it. Oh, one more advantage to that is if you were to ever change from Patreon, you could redirect /Patreon to go to the new funding source.
Yes, I could.
And anybody who bookmarked it or not bookmarked it, but who had written that one thing down, remembered it, they'd go to the right place.
And anyone listening to old episodes where I may have said it out loud, not a problem. Okay, so that gives us our URL structure. And then now that all of that thinking work has been done and decided, now, well, what layouts do I need for Jekyll? Well, it turns out the taxonomy just tells you what I have to build. So I ended up with, I made something called a default base layout, which is like the very, very, very generic skeleton. And then, you know the way it's nesting dolls? So we talked about Jekyll layouts are like nesting dolls. So I made something called default_base, which is not actually used anywhere, except for the fact that default uses default base. And so does contributor. So those two actual layouts use default_base as their starting point to save me some work.
Oh, okay.
And then the other layouts turned out to be very bespoke. So my front page is very different to every other page on the site. So that's its own special layout because the front page is your shop stall, right? You have to lay out your stuff on the front page. I mean, you're the same on podfeet.com. Your front page is very different to every other page.
Right.
And my page for each individual podcast is also very different to every other page on the site. So that's another layout. And then each episode is obviously a very important thing to customize very heavily. So that is also its own custom layout so that you have the player and you have the short blurb and then you have the detailed show notes. You have the support the show buttons, very important. So that's again a very customized layout. And then redirect is that custom layout we looked at above. So that's all I had to build. And then all of that falls into Jekyll's folder structure. And I literally didn't customize any of this. Hypothetically, you can customize every single folder location in Jekyll, but then every piece of documentation and every piece of advice will be wrong because you've made it wrong. So I was like, why would I do that to myself? So I accepted the defaults, which means that all of this design work I've done falls into a predefined place. So docs/star.md for Markdown is where all the special pages go. So docs/credits.md for the credits page, support.md for the support page, etc. The podcasts themselves, so Let's Talk Apple, Let's Talk Photography, those two podcast pages, they're in docs/podcasts/star.md.
Why the underscore?
Because that as we're going to learn, everything that is a collection has to start with an underscore, which is why when you're writing show notes for this series, it's _PBS and _tidbits.
Collection.
We haven't learned about them yet. That's
Okay.
a teaser for.
Okay.
That's your bucket, right? So the generic bucket becomes a folder that starts with an underscore. So I talked about my 5 conceptual buckets. Well, here you see that they are 5 folders.
Okay.
And so on the PBS website, there's 2 buckets, PBS and Tidbits.
Gotcha.
And then my podcast episodes are _LTA and _LTP. The contributors are _contributors and the redirects are _redirects. And then where the Jekyll pieces go for the actual layouts, well, that's all predefined by Jekyll. So _includes for all the reusable little snippets, _layouts for the layouts, _SASS for the SASS style sheets. They will be compiled by Jekyll to CSS, but they are SASS files. And then there's the standard placeholder to connect the SASS into your actual HTML. So that's style.scss. And then you have the font awesome in the assets folder, all of my various banners and logos in the assets/graphics folder, and the JavaScript files for Bootstrap in the assets/JavaScript folder. So that's the same structure as in our demo site we've been using so far.
What about embedded pictures? Images.
Yeah, so they are not on the site at all. They also weren't in my WordPress, and that was by design, because I've sort of had it in the back of my mind that I may want to move someday, and so I've been using a content delivery network for my media. So when I embed an example image into a blog post, I'm putting those onto my CDN, my content delivery network, and my media files are on my content delivery network, which is at media.lets-talk.ie. So they were already separate, and they just stayed exactly where they were.
So are they just a giant pile of images, or is there a whole taxonomy and structure over there for that too?
They're laid out into folders that are somewhat sensible. I don't remember exactly. So there was /LTA for the Let's Talk Apple MP3s, /LTP.
Oh, MP3s also. I was asking about images.
The MP3s are there too.
Huh.
Yes, the MP3s are there too.
Okay.
And basically, as far as I am concerned, when I look at it using my favorite client, which is Transmit, it looks like a folder, like a folder of folders of files. It's actually under the hood Amazon S3 compatible storage, which you can buy from Amazon, Google, or from anyone. I just buy it from DigitalOcean because they offer the optional extra on top of their S3 storage of giving you the content delivery network. And so any S3 client will work. I just use Transmit, which presents it to me kind of as if it was SFTP. You couldn't tell that it was any different to dropping files onto your Podfeed server.
Okay.
But under the hood, it's the CDN using the S3 protocol.
Okay. So you have places to throw MP3 files, and you don't do a lot of images. A lot of times yours are maybe pointing over to your glass photos, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I prefer to do that because, well, someone else is paying for the hosting.
Yeah.
And keeping them online,
But I guess in a way, your DigitalOcean CDN is sort of like the way I use Libsyn to store the MP3 files.
Right. Exactly the same. Yeah, Libsyn is a CDN, right? It's a content delivery network optimized for delivering those files to everyone around the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a different mechanism. Libsyn's mechanism is unique and special. As you discover when Libsyn goes even slightly wrong.
Yeah.
And of course, there's always more to do, because have you ever found a piece of code that's finished?
Yeah, there is no end of file, right?
There is no end of file. My biggest piece of unfinished work is absolutely the content import, and that's largely because I built up technical debt for the last 10 plus years. I keep on thinking my podcasts are new, but they're only monthly, and I'm at episode 150. They're not new.
Yeah, Let's Talk Apple started
amazing
13 years ago, 12 and a half years ago.
Good God. There you go. Well, that tells you how old they are. And I have known from the start that I wasn't doing it right, and I had these great intentions that I would. Which means that in WordPress, there are things that I am hard coding into the content of my blog posts that isn't really content, it's metadata. Like, instead of having actual metadata to say who the guests are on the show, I was making a list in HTML in the actual WordPress post. And the embed for the podcast episode was actual HTML code in the WordPress post, and I was using text expander snippets to automatically plop in the legend at the bottom instead of it being part of my theme. And I knew all of that was the wrong thing to do, because the only thing that should be inside that box for the WordPress post is my actual content, and everything else should be metadata, and it should be in its own separate fields. And I know that WordPress can do all of that with custom fields, custom plugins, custom themes. And God knows I did try to teach myself enough PHP and enough for the WordPress API, and I think I had abortive starts in doing this 3 or 4 times, and I never got it to work. And I gave up, and I just kept building up technical debt. And my answer is, if I can't customize WordPress, I'm leaving. Unfortunately, that means that when I went to leave, I had a mess. I had all of that technical debt. Oh, look, it's just come due. So I needed to get my data out, and I decided not to let perfect be the enemy of the good, even if the data was imperfect when it came across. If it was all there and it could be read, then it's okay to migrate the site, move forward, and turn off WordPress. And I can clean up to make it look pretty later. So I needed to get my old data out. And I had 2 data sources that I could sort of pick and choose the least bad bits and assemble them into one new Markdown file per episode. Because the podcast RSS has a little one sentence blurb inside the description.
Mhm.
The podcast RSS feed knows the URL I should embed into the player. It knows the title of the episode. So the podcast RSS feed actually has a lot of the data I'm going to want to pull into the front matter of my posts in Jekyll. But it doesn't have the full show notes. But I can get those out of WordPress by going into WordPress and saying export posts and telling it export the entire category Let's Talk Apple. And then WordPress gives me an export file. And much to my relief, when you do that, WordPress very cleverly uses a very generic format for that export. It's an RSS file. It's an RSS file with some extra data fields for the WordPress metadata, but it's actually an RSS file. Which means I don't have 2 completely different pieces of data. I have 2 RSS files. The podcast RSS and the WordPress export RSS.
Okay.
So they're the same type of data. So I at least had a chance of knitting them together. And so I know that RSS is XML. And I know from years of experience that I hate XML.
Really?
Like, XML is just you can read it as a human.
Right.
But writing code to process XML has only ever ended in tears in my entire professional career.
Oh.
I hate having to process XML. So I decided I was going to see, can I get away without processing XML? Turns out I can. There's an NPM package called Podcast Parser, which turns RSS into JSON. And JSON is my favorite file format. JSON is the opposite of XML to me. I love getting my data into JSON because once it's in JSON, I can use JQ. Yeah.
So what is it you needed to do? What did you need to parse? What did you have to?
So I had these 2 giant big files, and in those files somewhere is an item for each podcast episode, an item for Let's Talk Apple 5 from the podcast RSS, and an item for that same episode in the WordPress export. And together they had everything I wanted.
Okay.
Individually, neither had it all.
Okay.
So I needed to line the 2 up, pull in the 2 data sources, reconcile the episodes by parsing the title field, and I was 80% consistent, so I needed to write quite a few if statements for all of the different ways I accidentally changed my format in the 13 years of podcasting. Sometimes I used an M dash, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I used a colon instead of a dash. I wasn't as consistent as I thought. But a few if statements, and I actually was able to marry the data perfectly. And then I could pick and choose. And so I took the titles out of the podcast RSS. I took the audio files out of the audio URLs out of the podcast RSS. I took the little short blurb out of the podcast RSS, and I took the full show notes out of the WordPress export. And then I could assemble all of those into a Markdown file with front matter.
For each episode.
And that would be one for each episode, and I could pop them into those folders. So that's what I had to do.
That was done programmatically, though, what you were just saying, using JQ. Okay.
Yeah. So JQ and some JavaScript scripts using Node.js.
Now I see the difference between reading XML, which is fine, but processing it, no, that'd be a nightmare without JQ.
Yeah. Now, I told you I had hard-coded a whole bunch of glop into every episode. So my full show notes contain a lot of glop. So they don't look pretty. But every word of my notes is there. So nothing has been lost. So if you go to, say, episode 32 or something long enough ago that I definitely haven't fixed it yet, it's there. It's readable. It's not pretty, but it's readable. Now, I was building those Markdown files with that front matter. So I had a little lightning bolt, And I decided to capture in every single Markdown file as I was building it a little tag, some YAML to tell me what I needed to do to finish importing this episode fully. So I just added warnings : metadata : unreviewed, unchecked guests, telling me that the metadata part of that file, I need to actually look over it to make sure it's all cromulent. Like, I did parse the dates and I think they all came through correctly, but they're worth a little double check. Are the dates actually sane? And I need to actually add the guests because the host is correct in all the episodes because it's me. That was really easy. That was just me.
It's all about you,
But
Bart.
the guests I need to pop in. Yes, so I need to pop the guests in.
I just
The
looked at
blurb has
April
been-
22 LTA 104, and I can see Elaine Giles from MacBites and the delightful Scott Wilsey from the Friends with Beer podcast. Did not know he'd been on the show. Forgot about that. And but there's no link in it to them. And that's the kind of thing
Right.
that's in there. Okay.
Yeah, because what you have is the hard-coded stuff I copied and pasted into WordPress has
Yeah.
now ended up in the detailed show notes part of the episode.
Right.
But it's not in the YAML front matter, which means it doesn't show up as a nice list of guests and stuff, and they're not clickable because that's just hard-coded glop from WordPress. That has to be actually converted into the proper data.
Right.
So that's what I mean by review the guests.
Yeah,
Or check the guests.
You do have panel down lower, and you've got the names and the URLs, so the data's all there to put it into the right place to add it, but I can see what you're talking about. Then there's some missing buttons, and then the audio MP3 short code from WordPress, that kind of thing. This is all got to be done by hand?
Yeah, but actually most of it is deleting.
Oh.
Right. It's all of that copied and pasted glop gets deleted. The only thing that you have to do is actually put the YAML front matter for the guests. And that's easy for guests who you've already met once while you're working.
Mm-hmm.
So every time I meet you, it's great because I already have your contributor page made. But the first time I meet a contributor, I actually have to create a contributor page because in WordPress, I never bothered. So I had no data to import. So now I have to write a bio and collect the current and working social media links for all of my guests. Because, hey, the ones I hard-coded into WordPress, a whole bunch of them are on X, and a whole bunch of people have sodded off.
Yeah.
Me, for a start.
Right.
So they all had to be reviewed. And they're all getting, some of the bios are quite short, just a little one-liner, but they should still say, like, who the heck is this person? Why are they here? Right? I should at least give a little, so-and-so is a professional photographer. So-and-so has been podcasting about Apple for 20 years. Something. So the first time I meet a guest, there's a little bit more work because I got to make their contributor page. But after that, I just have to put guest : and just list them. And then once the slug, just put their slugs in. And then I just need to clean up the notes, which is just deleting things. All of that hard-coded glop just has to come out. All of those broken buttons and stuff, because you don't need them, because there's a shiny player in the top right corner. Why do you need all of that glop that was hard-coded into WordPress? It's all properly shiny in the layout. So most of it is just deleting. Now, because all of this front matter is in the front matter, I can use it in Jekyll. So I made a secret page that isn't in any of the menus, but it does exist on the website. It's at /temp-episodes-2review.html. And that link in the show notes is clickable. And that reads all of my Markdown files and just lists them all together, telling me where I still have work to do. So I can track over time. And you'll see, I've done the start and the end of each of my shows.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out where the middle was.
Perfect.
Okay, 1 to 5 and everything in between. Okay, got it.
Yeah, well, so you see it there. And as I keep working, that list will just shrink and shrink and shrink.
Okay.
And so because I have this metadata, those pages, like the one you were just on, have little warning alerts that are in my they're in my layouts with if statements. If there's warning to say the metadata is wrong, put up the little alert with the working man with the shovel, saying, "Hey, look, the metadata has not been reviewed yet. If the show notes haven't been cleaned up yet, just put an apology saying, really sorry, they're a bit of a mess, but it is all here." I can't remember exactly how I worded it, but I was fairly playful, I think.
Yeah.
You're looking at one probably. And so as I fix them, I take away the metadata to say I need to fix them. They disappear from my to-do list and the warnings disappear.
Oh, that's
so in the very latest episodes, none of those.
I love it.
Yeah. So it's like if I wait to get all of this done, I am never moving websites ever, ever, ever. Because I would, a month will go by, I'll make more shows and I won't have cleaned up enough. I'll just never move. So I was like, fine, I'm just going to put up this warning. This'll do. And it's going to take me a while, but then I'm going to get it done.
Right.
By the way, it's all on GitHub. If anyone wants to send me a few pull requests, happily accepted.
So I've been looking at it here and I'm trying to think, like I happen to know Scott Wilsey's website, which is, you have Friends with Beer, and I don't know if he changed the name, but it's called Friends with Brews, actually. So the URL, I know how to fix that one, but I don't know how to do it.
Okay, so if you look in the GitHub, there's docs/_contributors.
Got it.
And so you'd make a page called Scott_Wilsey.md.
Right.
And you'd copy and paste your Markdown file, and then you just tweak.
But I started looking at it. Oh, but it looks like it's a table. Title, slug, sort name.
But look at the Markdown file. Don't look at the rendered HTML. Look at the Markdown file.
Okay, so I'd have to, so again, do a fork of the, okay.
Do a fork and send me a pull request. And like I say, if you copy and paste, your profile is really complete. So if you copy and paste your one or my one, you just delete stuff, right? Instead of the nice big long bio of Alison, you just put a one-liner for Scott. And instead of Alison's 20 links, you just put Scott's, 2 or 3.
And if Scott wants to have more information provided, he can do a pull request.
Exactly. Exactly.
Very good.
The other thing I don't have is tags. I have wanted tags since forever.
Let me ask you why.
I didn't do them in WordPress.
Why?
Because I kind of want to be able to say, what's every episode I've done about the App Store? Or in Let's Talk Photography to be even more useful, what's every episode I've done about bokeh? If they were just tagged, I could just go to the bokeh tag.
You don't think you could do a search on Let's Talk let's...
I could do, but
and search for bokeh?
Could just make it easier.
How?
A tag has a few advantages because it sort of I could put them in so those little cards for each episode could have the tags.
Yeah.
Which is they're kind of a symbol to the humans. Hey, of all of the words here, these 4 words are the important ones. This is about these 3-4 concepts.
I think about this a lot because every single thing I do is tagged. It's all tags. I don't do anything with it.
Your theme doesn't expose them.
Yeah, because I don't know what they're for. I mean, you can search for the words, and I don't even get it because like if you had said the word bokeh, it would be in that you could do a search for bokeh. It would find it.
Yeah, but that would also find everything where I mentioned the word like I'm not going to talk about bokeh today.
True.
Well, that's going to show up for the search, but I wouldn't have tagged it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't believe in them, but I do them. I don't expose them.
And I'm the opposite, Alison. I do believe them and I don't do them.
So between us is the right answer. I really hope we get hate mail yelling at me, telling me why I should have tags or why I should use my tags.
I look forward to the Slack, podfeet.com/Slack, our redirect. Go back. So if I had done them, they would have come in that import. They would have been sitting in the JSON files I made from the RSS files, and I would have been able to pull them into my Markdown files. They didn't exist, so I couldn't. But I am thinking in this day of LLMs, I can probably solve this problem by, for the first time ever, learning the API for one of the chatbots and just writing a short little script that says, take this Markdown file, call this LLM and ask this LLM a prompt like, give me 5 keywords that capture the most important concepts, and then put them into the Markdown, into the front matter at the top of the Markdown files. So I think I can do that with an LLM and a script. So that's on my sort of to-do list after I fix the content so it doesn't look like poop. And also it will confuse the LLM, giving it all that, leftover mess.
It's funny that you would mention that just this week on a lark. Dorothy's wonderful PBS index that we have?
Yes.
I thought, I wonder if an LLM can just do that for me. ChatGPT fell over in a heap. It just kept asking me more questions and saying, I'll create it using the titles of the episodes. No, I could do that. And
That exists. It's called the front page.
exactly. And so I just gave Claude the instructions and said, just go to town. I'm not going to give you any information. Just don't use the titles. It asked me 2 or 3 questions, and it spit out a beautiful Markdown file index.
There you go.
I don't know what I'm going to do with it. It was just an exercise for fun, but it's pretty easy to do.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see what you can and can't do. So
You
that
don't
seems like
necessarily
something
have
I
to
could
do an API. You can just write a text expander snippet that asks the question. For this page I just wrote, boom. Give me the keywords.
Yeah, but see, this is one of these things where maybe the thing I actually want to learn is how to do the LLM API thing, and maybe this is an excuse to do it.
Fair. We will allow it.
Yeah, we're both nerds. We both do that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And then the other thing is I'm finding little niggles, of course. And also there's listener feedback coming in. I already have a few pieces. So I'm going to collect those together and not even going to look at them for a couple of months. Just let a few of them collect. And then when I have a bit of time, I'll address a bunch of them together. But I don't want to forget them. So they are actually being captured as GitHub issues since it's a public GitHub site. So I've posted a few. We have one in there from a listener already. If you discover something, pop it in an issue.
Cool.
And then I can get to it. And all of this, of course, is to help me write the next installments of Programming by Stealth. So what are we going to do for, I was going to say the first half of 2026, the middle quarters of 2026? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to backfill the things I've discovered we should have learned before now by stumbling into them in January. We're going to start with something nice and easy to ease us back in because it's been a while. We're going to do CSS variables. Like I say, I discovered they were shockingly straightforward, but very powerful. So that seems like a nice bite-sized piece to get us going. Then we're going to backfill that SASS thing that I'd never told you what it stood for, because I knew we were going to have to backfill that. And then with those 2 pieces of knowledge, we can also backfill our Bootstrap to bring us up from Bootstrap 4 to Bootstrap 5 so that you can start to use the CSS variables and stuff for your web apps with Bootstrap.
Okay.
So that will be nice and empowering for you and for the listeners. And then we can move into the data architecture, the information architecture sort of aspects of Jekyll. So I haven't needed to do it for the Let's Talk, but you can blog with Jekyll. And my next mini project for next January is bartb.ie, that train wreck. And that is a blog. So that needs to do blogging in Jekyll. And then we have these buckets, as I was hand-wavingly calling them. They are Jekyll collections. Well, we need better learn about those then, hadn't we? And that will be very helpful to you because PBS uses 2 of those collections for PBS and Tidbits. So they'll be good to cover that anyway. And it will make some more sense of those underscore folders I described earlier. And then finally, that open graph thing I have waxed lyrical about. We should look at that. And then actually we'll have really good Jekyll coverage. People will be ready to write really good web pages for free without having to take on the hassle of running a database and stuff. And then that's one of those things where you can evolve. You may well outgrow a static site generator and move into WordPress, but the concepts will come with you. And there are importers to go from Jekyll to WordPress as it happens.
Okay.
So you can grow. So that's where we are. And I hope you found, I do try when I'm writing PBS to make the examples illustrative, but they kind of have to be simple or the message gets lost, but that simplicity means it can be difficult to understand how you apply it in the real world. And I'm forever trying to juggle those 2 things because if I make it too simple, then it doesn't get the point across. And if I make it too complicated, the point gets lost. And I struggle. But
the lived examples are really good because there's no hand waving. It's all real.
Right. Yeah. But I thought, it should be helpful. I hope it was helpful to see how those little examples can be put into a bigger story like this very real world website.
I liked it. I thought this was really interesting. A lot of pieces of this. I liked it the first time reading it, and I liked even better learning it from you. So this is perfect. Looking forward to now. Yay. We know where our path is. So those are going to be, We're done with tidbits for a little while. We're going to dive back into real installments.
Yeah, these are all real topics, right? We'll have a real topic, just a little one standalone real topic for CSS variables. I think SASS might be 2, but it'll be a fairly short chunk of real PBS. And then moving us to Bootstrap 5 will probably be one little real world PBS, because we covered Bootstrap 4 in PBS very extensively, so we just need to refresh ourselves. And then all the Jekyll stuff, proper back into the main feed, and then the open graph will be one episode. That's actually simple but powerful.
Very cool. All right. Looking forward to it, Bart. And hopefully I'll keep from falling and hurting myself for a little while.
Do please.
Walking slower and slower. I'm terrified to leave the house and the carpeting.
Well, certainly until you're, how many more weeks of
about halfway through, so 2 more weeks of not walking on that foot for now. I want to walk outside though, Bart. I miss outdoors. I really do.
Well, your outdoors is extra inviting. It's like warm and sunny.
Excessively warm right now. So, alrighty. Okay. Well, this has been great, and we'll see you hopefully in a couple of weeks.
Fingers crossed in 2 weeks' time. So until then, happy computing.
If you learn as much from Bart each week as I do, I'd like you to go over to lets-talk.ie and press one of the buttons over there to help support him. You know, during most Programming by Stealth episodes, Bart does 98% of the work, while I'm just the stooge who listens and asks the dumb questions. If you go over to lets-talk.ie, you can support him on Patreon, you can donate via PayPal, or you can use one of his referral links. I really hope you go over there and help him out. You can join other Programming by Stealth students in our Slack community at podfeet.com/Slack. You can contact me directly at allison@podfeet.com, and I encourage you to check out all of the shows we do over at podfeet.com. Thanks for listening, and stay subscribed.